Hey everyone, it's Ben. If you have a Hotpoint dryer that looks like this one, it has this sort of knob arrangement on it or something similar, I want to show you everything there is to know about the machine. If you try to press the start button and well, it just won't turn on. What are the different things that could have caused this unit not to start properly? We're going to go from easiest and cheapest to some of the more difficult things that will require us to get inside the unit. You don't need too many tools to do this, so let's go ahead and start operating on the unit to get it back to working. And if you do find that you need any parts in the unit, make sure to check out the links in the description for all the things that could be used to repair this unit. For this test and fixes, we need a 1/4-inch hex head screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, and a flat-bladed screwdriver, as well as a multimeter. Going to the machine, the first and easiest step is to listen and look at the timer on this model. When you turn it clockwise, does it make a cranking noise or does it sound like it's clicking? When you pull the knob off, then, is the timer shaft okay? Is the back side of the knob in good condition? If it's cracked and damaged or sheared apart, it may not be cycling through the modes and is secretly stuck in the off position. And if this is the case, either replace the knob or replace the timer itself if the shaft is broken on the timer. Next, let's inspect the dryer start switch. Take a screwdriver and gently pry it off. There are 3 small clips that hold it in. Close up, does the switch look broken, cracked, or damaged? If it's damaged, it's possible that when you press in, it's actually not clicking the switch on. Try pressing into the housing and trigger the switch and see if it starts now. Next, another test you can do is open the dryer door, tape the door switch in the lower left corner shut so it acts like it's shut but with the door open. Then spin the drum counterclockwise while pressing the push to start button. If suddenly it starts working, the start windings on the dryer drum motor are going bad, and unfortunately you need to replace the motor or do this every time to start it. Alternatively, if you feel a huge amount of resistance when you try to turn the drum, an obstruction of some sort could be causing an issue and you need to disassemble the unit. Alternatively, if it runs really well, maybe the belt is broken and we need to get inside and find that too. Finally, on the last tests without disassembly, you could check and see if it runs only when the switch is pressed and held in. If this is the case, either the centrifugal switch on the motor is bad or the belt switch is bad, and we'll get inside to test that switch in a little bit. Now to the disassembly. First, move the dryer to where you can access the back of the machine. This test is a little dangerous, so you may want to wear some latex gloves due to dealing with electricity. At the bottom of the unit, use a 1/4-inch hex head screwdriver to loosen the screw on the panel at the bottom where the power cord goes in. Open that panel up and inspect where the cord comes in at, which goes to the terminal block. Does anything look damaged, unhooked, or burnt? If so, there's your culprit and you'll need to either replace the terminal block or the power cord that comes in. But if everything looks fine, you need to take your multimeter out and set it to the voltage reading. And for this part, you do need to have the unit plugged in, if only for this one test. With the multimeter on voltage AC, use the leads of your multimeter to test each set of posts on the dryer. Middle to left, then middle to right. Both of these should be right around 120 volts. Then test the left side of the right side. You should get at least 208 volts, if not more. Now, if that number is much lower than 208, or the voltage is above 240, either the cord or breaker have an issue. You could always try to trip the breaker to the dryer all the way off, then all the way on to attempt to reset it. Now, if this gets your dryer to start, congratulations, you fixed it, but if not, the quarter outlet is bad, and that job could be more for an electrician if the outlet is bad or something in the breaker box. Before we begin working on the back side of the unit though, go ahead and unplug the dryer from the wall as we may be disconnecting the wires soon. There's also a fuse at the very bottom of the housing that we want to inspect. Take your multimeter and set it to ohms resistance or continuity. Then use the leads of your multimeter and put it to each side of the fuse. If the fuse is bad, you would not get continuity through it. If the fuse is good, you should get about 0.00 on the multimeter. For example, in this unit, the fuse is good. Now let's get to the control system. Take your screwdriver and remove the 2 screws on each side of the plastic unit. They are a 1/4-inch hex head, or you could use a fillet bit as well. Next, you want to remove the 4 screws that hold the metal back on, the same style as the 2 you just took out. Once you have these 4 screws out, slide the panel up and then out. It's important that you notice the schematic is located here, which will have technician info. There's also this green grounding screw that needs removed before you can fully take the panel off. Once you have that green grounding screw, which is a 1/4 inch, go ahead and pull on the panel to dislodge the console from the metal top. You need to press it to the rear of the machine and then up and pivot it out. On the console, the leftmost switch is the push to start switch. Set your multimeter to ohms resistance or continuity. You want to take the leads of the meter and place one lead on the top red wire and then one on the bottom brown wire. You may have to use the multimeter leads to press deep into the harness for them to hold on. You need to take a free hand and press the start switch in on the front of the unit to see if your multimeter gets a reading. It should get a reading of 0.00. If you press and hold the button, it stays on OL or doesn't get any signal, then the switch is bad and that is what you need to get to fix your problem. In a very rare case, you could also set the dryer timer to any setting like timed heat, and it should force the motor contacts to turn on the timer itself, and you could test with the multimeter and see if you get continuity. Turn the knob to a setting and test the leads of the multimeter indicated on that brown schematic we have a little bit earlier. You may have to remove a wire from the harness to test this, but you should get continuity between the corresponding proper spade connectors that involve the motor. Just reference the schematic. If you should be getting a signal out of it and you don't, then the timer is bad and it needs replaced. Going a little bit further, in extremely rare cases, this resistor could go bad and cause the dryer some issues. Just set your multimeter to ohms resistance. You should get about 4,500 ohms on this resistor. If it's broken, you'd get an OL symbol and you need to replace it. Now let's go ahead and dig into the front of the dryer. There are 2 screws on the rear of the chassis, one on each side that needs removed with a Phillips head screwdriver. Let's go ahead and skip ahead and take the 2 screws out of the front of the dryer here. You will use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove both of these screws, one on the left, one on the right inside the door. You can then take a screwdriver to pop the top of the dryer. You can angle it ajar slightly to either side, and this will let you look in and see if the belt on the drum is damaged or shaved in any way. To get ready to remove the front door, snap the console back into the dryer top, then lift the lid of the dryer carefully, slowly, and gently, and pivot it against the wall behind the dryer. If you do this correctly, it will rest quite well at this point. On some models of dryers, there's going to be a light switch harness on the left side at the top as you see here, but not all do. You'll need to press into the harness and then remove it. Now there are 2 hex head screws, one on each side of the dryer that need taken out. Once you have both of these removed, you can then pull on the door to get ready to remove it. But this is the most difficult part, I think, of dealing with a Hotpoint dryer. To remove the door, you need to simply pull up on it to get it off the 3 fingers at the bottom of the dryer. However, the wire harness for the door lock will prevent you from moving this door very far away from the unit. The wire harness to the door lock is very short. You can carefully move the door to the left side and then remove the harness, but the one way that may be a little bit easier is to angle the door forward and rest it on a heavy box or use a chain to hold the door at an angle so it doesn't fall too far forward off of those hinges at the bottom. This will give you access to the wire harness from the rear. Either way, you have to move the horribly designed plastic cover to the side, then press into the harness and remove the wire harness from the door switch housing. If you split the door to the side, it uninstalls the same way, and it's your choice on how to handle it though. But at either rate, once the harness is removed, you can remove the door and move it aside away from the unit. Note that some models of Hotpoint dryers have the door light switch down where the door harness is, and some of them don't. Now let's go ahead and take the drum to the dryer out. We have to remove the idler pulley first, which is directly behind the blower motor housing. This dryer does not have a ton of room for your left hand, but quite a bit for your right, and that's the one you want to focus on. From the camera view on the inside to the right, this is what you're going to see. You can use your right hand to pull the pulley to the right, and the secret is if you pull far enough, there's a little tab on the motor mount of the unit that you can hold the idler pulley in place to remove the belt. The metal of the pulley can rest here, allowing you to have an easier time to release the belt from the idler. Here's another angle of that same action, but I didn't actually realize that this unit had that little mounting part. You want to make sure that the belt is removed from where the motor mount is, so even though it's loose, you need to move it away from that metal pulley that is on the motor. Otherwise, when you try to pull the drum out, it could snag on the belt mount like you see here. I was so focused on getting the right camera shots, I didn't realize that the belt was going to snag. Whoops. Use the belt when it's free of the pulley and motor to pull up and then out on the drum. The metal sides of the dryer have little grooves in them that will show you kind of like the shape of the drum so you can pull it out directly. If you pull up too far or too low, it won't be within that little oval. It'll rub on the sides or make a noise when it comes out. With the drum out, you can now view the inside of the unit to see what could be causing you any problems. The key items here to inspect would be the belt, the motor area, for dirt or other obstructions to the blower housing, and then anything else that could look irregular inside this unit. And we'll get to all the different components in a moment. In my case here, I'm going to go ahead and take precaution by cleaning the chassis out. The motor does feel like it's binding slightly due to dirt. I'm using a shop vac, which is good, but it's not going to get all the small areas of the dryer. I would suggest getting a dryer cleaning kit that has a small flexible hose to get any of the small parts and areas of the dryer, especially where the motor is. I'll have a link to the kit in the description because it's very possible if there's a ton of lint on the motor, it could have blocked either something in the motor or the vent or blower housing assembly, which could cause a safety fuse to pop, making the dryer again no longer start. Now, it's very possible that lint could have caused all your dryer issues with that safety fuse. It looks really nice now, but we're going to go ahead and look for more problems just the same. Let's start out by testing the drum outlet thermostat. Take your multimeter and set it to ohms resistance. You want to take one lead of the two larger spade terminals in blue off using a pair of needle nose pliers. Then press the leads of your multimeter to each side of the spade. You should get some sort of signal or about 0.00 or 0.01 ohms, or again the beeping noise. If you get that, your sensor's good. If you get an OL symbol, it's bad and needs replaced. You can also test the orange wires on the side using the same type of test, but you want to use ohms resistance, and you need to get about 9,000 ohms or 9.0k ohms. That would be a good average value. If it's much higher or lower than that, maybe more than 10 or 15% off, you would need to replace that. Next, let's check the safety fuse on the top left side of the pie plate heater. When testing, make sure not to touch or bend the coils on the heater itself, but you're going to do the same test we just did. Pull one wire off and set to ohms or continuity. You need to get 0.00 ohms, or again hear that beep. If you get an OL symbol or no beep, that means the unit is bad and needs replaced. The other fuse we want to test here is the thermo high limit. You're going to do, again, the same exact test. Remove a wire, use the leads of the multimeter, and test for ohms or continuity. Yet again, you want 0.00. If you get an OL symbol, then it's bad and needs replaced. Next, let's check the hidden or nearly hidden belt switch on the dryer. If you pull on the idler pulley, you should hear an audible click noise that tells you that the belt switch is engaging the pulley once it's in place with the drum and belt on. If you don't hear it click, then it isn't working, but you should also test it with a multimeter. Remove one spade of the belt switch and press the lead of your multimeter in. There's a little hole in the terminal which makes this easy for it to rest. On the left side of that same switch, I pressed the other lead into the wire harness, and then I started to bend the idler pulley. Hopefully you can see this on camera, but as I pull the idler pulley to a certain stage, I start getting continuity on the multimeter, showing that it's engaging properly, which means it works. If your multimeter isn't getting a signal when you pull the idler pulley far enough, then the belt switch is bad and needs replaced. Now, finally, we're going to the actual culprit on this particular dryer, the door switch. The door switch on Hotpoint dryers are very deceptive. They have 3 wires on them, which means you can actually cycle the light switch and make it look like it works, even though the door switch itself is not operable. If you noticed in the video, there's a ton of crud on the door lock, almost like someone taped it shut, which made me question if that was the issue with the unit. So here I am taking the door lock out. There's a plastic clip on the right side that has to be pressed in, and it's actually hidden past a metal sheath. Then once I have that pressed in, I have to remove the door switch from the front. But now we have the switch out, and I want to show you some testing on camera to show you what I mean. Sometimes even with the harness being installed, you may not get the right readings. But with this style of switch, according to the schematics, the middle and left wires, the brown and white, go to the door light, so when the switch is not pressed in, you get continuity through a multimeter. But when you depress the door switch, like the door is closed, you will get no continuity through those wires. But you should get continuity then through the middle and right wires, brown and yellow. And guess what? When you try this test on this particular door switch, it doesn't work, even though the light switch portion works. This is the mutiny of the Hotpoint dryer door switch, which is frustrating, but at any rate, when I take my multimeter to the old switch, and then here I have the new one, the camera should show you pretty well, but the new one works when the old one does not. When the switch is depressed, it's definitely bad. Here I am putting the new door lock into place. It's pretty straightforward. There's a metal piece on the back that likes to not stay in place and fall out, but I think Hotpoint redesigned that on new models. These are all the major things you want to look at when dealing with your Hotpoint dryer not starting. The very last thing I left off would be the motor run windings being bad. If you've gone over all of these steps and everything is checked out okay, then chances are the motor is bad and it may not be worth repairing because those motors are pretty expensive, but I'll have a link to the motor so you can kind of look and see what the price is, as well as all the other parts that could be the culprit in this type of dryer. So with that done, let's go ahead and put the drum back in for testing. Remember the idler pulley trick earlier? I would go ahead and pull it and have it set on the motor housing before we put the drum in. The drum has 2 grooves in it. Make sure the belt rests on the rear one where the black outline of the belt is. If yours is slightly different, it may be in a different position though. Take the dryer drum by the belt and slide it into place. The bearing on the rear of the drum should go in straight into the back of the bearing housing. Turn the drum slightly to make sure there aren't any obstructions or any weird noises that would suggest that it didn't get put in right. On the right side of the drum, this is what I see and how I need to put the idler pulley back into place by releasing the tension. But before you do that, make sure the belt is wrapped around the motor pulley properly so that when you release that tension, it goes on perfectly. This process could take a time or two to get right, but hopefully the camera kind of explains the mystery of the process. With the drum in place, you should be able to gently turn it and see the blower housing move along with the belt so everything here is engaged properly. You can also listen to any obstructions that could cause or suggest something didn't get installed right. Now go ahead and put the door back on. The bottom of the door is going to rest on these 3 metal fingers on the dryer chassis. Set the door onto the fingers and then pivot the door forward to the bulkhead. I would go ahead and rest something on the door front so you can reinstall the door lock at this point. Move the stupid plastic cover out of the way. Reinstall the door switch harness into the door like you see here. Hopefully the plastic cover doesn't snap and slash you in the fingers like they like to do on Hotpoint. When you pivot the door into place, you're going to have to get the bearing of the drum to rest on the door frame. This can be a little bit difficult, so you may have to open the dryer door and wedge it into place by moving the drum against the bearing, but it will seat into place. When you put the front of the door on, also make sure to notice that there are metal tabs on the inside of the door and on the sides of the chassis of the machine. These little fingers need to line up to make sure the chassis gets aligned properly. If you did anything to bend or warp the door slightly when working on the machine, it may not fit into place, which could make it look like the door just won't go back on. But once you have the front on, go ahead and insert the 2 short screws back into the top left and top right sides of the dryer. Both of these are 1/4-inch hex screws. If your door light harness was on top like mine, you'll need to go ahead and insert it back into place. Next, you'll want to secure the top of the dryer to the chassis. It needs brought forward and snapped into place. The rear is off a little bit, but we can get that adjusted easily off camera. With the top kind of secure, you can actually just go ahead and test the dryer to see if what you did worked. Plug the dryer in and see what happens. In the case of this dryer, we actually fixed the unit perfectly. It's running great. There's no noise from it at all. It's operating fine, and we haven't even actually put it all back together. It's also heating, and the temperatures look good. The sensor shows that the temperature keeps going up and up, and if you didn't do the installation processes to this point right properly, then you may have overlooked a wire harness and need to go back and check, or there's another difficult problem that this video sadly does not cover. Let's go ahead and finish putting the dryer back together though. Take the 2 long Phillips head screws and reinsert them to the top part of the dryer door. This will secure the top part of the dryer to the front of the cabinet. Now go ahead and insert 2 identical screws at the rear of the unit, one on left, one on right side. If you had unplugged any wires, go ahead and reinstall them at this point, but we did not. To get the console snapped back into place, the 6 fingers need slotted into these holes properly. You'll then pivot the console back into place and then tap on the rear of the console to push it forward to lock it into place. Before putting the metal back on, you need to reinsert the ground screw with the ground wire from the inside going to the outside. It's a 1/4-inch hex head, and when you have that done, there's a small metal finger on the left back that needs slotted into the plastic console. Then go ahead and slot the right side into place. It was bent a little bit, so I had to bend that with my screwdriver. Once that's done, you're going to install the 4 screws on the metal housing, right side and left. The last step now is to just install the 2 top hex head screws that go down in from the console into the metal top of the dryer. One on the right, one on the left. These are all the major fixes that you'd want to take doing your dryer, and now it's back to being fully assembled. I hope this video helps you out. All the major parts that we looked at for this dryer are going to be in the description of the video. Now, if you click on the links and purchase the parts through those links, it does help me buy more appliances to test, review, and fix. I also have 2 or 3 other videos on this exact Hotpoint dryer that we shot all at the same time. Those videos should now be displaying on the screen, so if you have any more questions, they may be able to help you. Have a great day.